morning, everyone, from Toronto, Canada, and a big hello, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our friends who've joined us from around the world. A huge welcome to our judges and our young debaters who are going to discuss the future of our planet. First of all, a very happy International Youth Day to everyone, and happy birthday, Green Hope Foundation. We are 8 years old today. I'm Keksha, founder president of Green Hope Foundation, and I am your moderator for this debate. And we are truly meeting on a momentous date where we celebrate the youth of the world as we commemorate and mainstream young people's voices, actions, and initiatives, as well as their meaningful, universal, and equitable engagement. For my team and I at Green Hope Foundation, it's also a day that commemorates the beginning of our mission that started in 2012 when, disillusioned at the complete lack of engagement of children at the Rio Plus 20 Earth Summit, I founded Green Hope Foundation. And if anyone were to ask me back then where I would see Green Hope in 8 years' time, I would not even have dared to exaggerate and say that we would have a presence in 16 countries with 2,060 young members who are making a difference on a daily basis. But I don't think that this impact is unique only to me or to Green Hope, because every young person has that innate potential. All we need is to seize that opportunity. But the road for us has not been easy, and neither will it be in the future. And the pandemic has shown us how fragile our infrastructures are, how vaunted our technologies are, how insufficient our resources are even in the richest countries of the world. So it's a time to introspect, to debate, and then take corrective actions. And this is the reason we have gathered here today from different parts of the world, connected virtually across time zones to debate on a topic that has critical relevance to the future of not only humanity, but of our planet. So the motion today is nuclear disarmament is the only route to world peace. We have Team Acacia from Oman. We have Team Banyan from India, we have Team Mangrove from Bangladesh, and Team CAF from the United Arab Emirates. And of course, we are truly privileged to have with us an absolutely stellar panel of judges who have agreed to spare their time and weigh the arguments of the competing teams and share with us their valuable experience on the subject. We are very pleased to welcome Madam Audrey Kitagawa, Chair of the Parliament of the World's Religions, Mr. Christopher King, Senior Political Affairs Advisor of the UNODA's Weapons of Mass Destruction Branch, Senator Douglas Roche, former Senator and author of Hope, Not Fear, Building Peace in a Fractured World, and the Right Reverend William Swing, President and Founding Trustee of the United Religions Initiative. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Before we begin, I shall quickly reiterate the rules. So we have two segments. In the first segment, Team Acacia will be the proposition and Team Banyan will be the opposition. In the second segment, Team Mangrove will be the proposition and Team CAF will be the opposition. Each team has 5 minutes for giving their introductory statements, which will be followed by the rebuttals. After the rebuttals, we shall start the second segment that will follow the same format. And after the rebuttals from the second segment, we shall have the concluding remarks from each of the teams. Each team will have 4 minutes for their conclusion. I would like to bring to the attention of the judges that each team will have 2 people introducing their statement and 2 people giving their concluding remarks. And the names on your scoring sheets are in the order of speakers. I would now request Team Mangrove and Team CAF to please switch off your cameras so that we can begin our first segment. Okay. Team Acacia and Team Banyan, are you guys ready? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Awesome.
ma'am.
Awesome. I see thumbs up and yeses. Great. So please wave when I say your name so that we know who you are. The members of Team Acacia are Jocelyn, Evangeline, Radia, and Johan. All right, Jocelyn and Evangeline will give the introductory remarks, and Radia and Johan will give the concluding remarks. Now, the members of Team Banyan are Ananya, Vaishnavi, Aditya, and Narayan. Ananya and Vaishnavi will give the introductory remarks, and Aditya and Narayan will give the concluding remarks. Okay, let's begin. So, Team Acacia, you have 5 minutes for your introduction. Your time starts now.
The nuclear arms race is like two sworn enemies standing waist deep in gasoline, one with 3 matches, the other with 5. Quoted by Carl Sagan, a famous scientist and author. A very good evening, honorable judges, moderator, respected opposing team, and my dearest audience. Today, Team Acacia will be speaking for the motion, nuclear disarmament is the only route to world peace. The most terrifying weapon created by mankind is now being proliferated by several countries participating in a nuclear arms race. And the justification given for this is the nuclear deterrence theory. That is how one country doesn't attack another country so that the other country doesn't retaliate, causing war. But this theory is entirely flawed since the nuclear weapons testing and proliferation is solely based on how much of a devastating blow each country is capable of, and keeping what at stake again? The very life of their citizens. So a sensitive situation like this needs effective communication, which the countries with nukes are ironically boycotting, leaving adequate room for misunderstanding, as most of the communications are now non-verbal, where the stance of a country is inferred by their alliance formations, weapons testing, and even rumors instead of actual statements the countries release. And this will only contribute to build further distrust between countries and definitely not peace. The threats of nuclear arming cannot be waved aside. It is time to awaken to the reality that nuclear arsenals, which are supposedly meant to prevent war, can fail catastrophically, threatening the very existence of human civilization as we know it. Even though taking the path of disarmament might seem risky, its stakes are far less than maintaining nuclear arsenals justified by an unreliable theory. Building more nuclear arms against other countries in fear doesn't equate to world peace. And therefore, Team Acacia strongly supports the motion nuclear disarmament is the only route to world peace. Thank you.
As long as nuclear weapons continue to exist, so will the temptation to threaten others with an overwhelming military force, quotes Dakazu Kida, a Japanese philosopher. The common assumption is that nuclear weapons provide some form of physical protection against an attack. This is simply wrong. The weapons and the threat of their use provide absolutely no physical protection. The only protection provided is psychological, and once the weapons start flying, it will become clear that psychological protection is not physical protection. One can believe the weapons make them safer, but this is not the same as actually being safer. Apart from country heads, several terrorist organizations are also trying very hard to obtain nuclear weapons. One simply cannot envision the destruction of nuclear terrorism. Moreover, the system controlling nuclear arms can also be hacked, as not all countries have a very high security system. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that we need not have to remind you of the Fukushima and Chernobyl nuclear disasters. Natural disasters and human errors are inevitable. Accidents happen. There is no such thing as a foolproof system. One simply cannot take chances with life-threatening things. Any misunderstanding and miscommunication can lead to a disaster. Nuclear weapons not only pose a horrifying life threat to us, but can also destroy the whole ecosystem of this planet. One of the deepest longings of the human heart is for security, peace, and stability. The existence of nuclear weapons capable of causing mass destruction with just the blink of an eye is clearly not the answer to this desire. Thus, we, Team Caucasia, strongly support the motion nuclear disarmament is the only route to world peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Acacia. All right, Team Banyan, you have 5 minutes for your introduction. Your time starts now.
To quote Hazel Healy, the pressures on our world are serious and expected to grow. Humankind must ditch the military habit and tackle conflict at its roots. Unquote. Even today, if we talk about a girl born in Syria, no matter the intellect she has, no matter how talented she is, she still does not have the access to the basic resources of education. She still fails to claim her basic rights to equality, right against exploitation, and right to health care. She still does not have the freedom of speech, freedom of life, and freedom from fear. I just have one simple question for you. Even if we succeed in our mission to eradicate nuclear armament, would we succeed in helping this little child who just wants an access to the basic resources of life? Peace is not all about ending wars. You can take a terrorist out of a terror or war zone, as you may say, but you cannot take the terrorism out of him unless you educate him. The world is under the impact of so many crises, and you cannot even think of achieving world peace when problems like illiteracy, hunger, and intra-country conflicts persist. You cannot even think of achieving world peace when it's the corrupt politicians funding arms versus the Boko Haram. In lucid words, you cannot achieve world peace unless you completely obliterate the root causes to conflicts. When I talk about the root causes, I am talking about the gender-based violence, the fear to even speak up against unjust laws and discrimination, the absence of local medical humanitarian interventions. Nuclear disarmament is surely one of the major ways to achieve world peace. But I ask you this again. Is nuclear armament the only issue faced by the world today? Food security is still a major issue. But what is the problem? How can it be 2020 and people are still going hungry? They simply do not have the money to purchase food, which is due to lack of job opportunities and unemployment. This is a vicious cycle of inertia. How unemployment leads to hunger, which leads to malnutrition, which is the cause of suffering. How will you eliminate all these major issues by only nuclear armament? There is no peace until even a single human on this planet suffers due to the lack of the basic necessities of life. Thank you.
As my fellow mate rightly mentioned, that world peace cannot be merely achieved by the elimination of armed weapons. No common civilian would ever be able to live a life with peace until he or she is provided with his basic human rights like education, enough food resources, equality, and most importantly, opportunity. We realize the importance of pens and books when we see the guns. We realize the importance of a voice when we are silenced. Our opinions and knowledge is our most powerful weapon. One teacher, one child, one book, one pen can change the world. Education is the only solution to illiteracy, poverty, and terrorism. When it comes to equality of women, girls are still not allowed to attend schools because their families need them to work or because they live in conflict zones. Mounting evidence show that women's involvement not only speeds peace negotiation, but it also leads to peaceful relations between states. Whether it is food security, health, demographics, or economic prosperity, the answer lies in how women are treated. According to me, the ultimate cause of unrest in the world lies in the deadly ideology of statism. Yes, you know this term. Statism was one of the major factors of World War II. Statism is the doctrine that society owns the individual, that the individual is a tool through which society pursues its collective aim, that it's practical, proper, and necessary for the state to initiate physical force against helpless and disarmed individuals. So, not only nuclear disarmament, but also the removal of such social evils contributes towards world peace. Nuclear weapons may not be the only source for disharmony. Try looking around you. Try to understand the malfunctions present in the administrative system of this world. You won't be able to understand the root causes of war and unrest by just looking at how nations treat each other. You have to look at first how nations treat their own citizens. So, if you really want peace, don't just go on nuclear disarmament as the only route. You can start by condemning those governments that oppress their own citizens instead of providing them with love and support. At last, I would want to ask you all, why kill or be killed when you can live and let live? Why engage in death, destruction, and misery when you can instead enjoy life, production, and prosperity? Thank you.
Thank you, Team Banyan. And thank you to both our teams for their introductions. We shall now begin the rebuttal round. You have 1 minute per team to make your point. Team Acacia, your time starts now.
Kekishan, who is speaking now?
Acacia. Sorry, guys. Team Acacia will be speaking now in the rebuttal.
What's the name of the individual who is speaking now, who's going to speak now?
Guys, if you can say your name and then start your rebuttal, then our judges, will be easier for our judges to see who is speaking. I hope that helps, Senator Roche.
Yes, yes. If I just know the name of the person who's going to speak now, just to clarify that, can you give the name of the person who's going to speak?
Yes, I can definitely do that. Team Acacia, who goes first? I see Jocelyn.
I will pick one.
Jocelyn is going first.
Jocelyn is speaking first, okay.
Yes. Jocelyn, your time starts now.
As my opposing team had mentioned, that there are so many resources wasted for nuclear arsenals, and it's not really contributing to other pressing global issues like poverty and hunger. Why not disarm nuclear arms that is wasting so many people's resources, the taxes that people are paying into using it for equality and hunger? For example, USA spends about 10 billion every single year for nuclear arsenals. Why not put this into education and hunger? Why are they being used for nuclear arsenals? Why don't we disarm it? Thank you.
Thank you, Team Acacia. Team Banyan? Yes, Ananya, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, even if we disarm the nuclear weapons, we cannot guarantee that the fund that is invested in nuclear weapons will be used in the resources of education and to curb the issues of hunger. We still cannot guarantee the use of these funds into respective particular resources to help the citizens. Because, ma'am, in a world where problems like illiteracy, hunger exist, and simultaneously corruption, we cannot guarantee that even after the nuclear weapons are disbanded, that this fund will be invested in helping out the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Ananya from Team Banyan. Team Acacia, your response, please.
I will go.
Okay, Evangeline is speaking from Team Acacia. Your time starts now.
Honorable opposing team, you had stated that it's not, we wouldn't be assured that the funds would be going for other purposes like education and poverty. But I fail to realize how the honorable team could not recollect these really heartbreaking disasters like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where people are still traumatized for life, suffering with PTSD and other things. They are fearing for their life. And education and literacy is come secondary, right? The first thing is your fear for your life and other life-threatening things that surround with nuclear disasters. So disarmament would at least give us some mental peace. Don't you think, my opposition team?
Thank you, Evangeline. Team Acacia, Team Banyan, you have the floor. Narayan, I see you've unmuted. So we have Narayan from Team Banyan. Your time starts now.
Greetings, everyone. As the proposition rightly mentioned, Team Banyan agrees with the fact that nuclear disarmament is one of the major solutions to world peace. However, it is not the only solution. And as you rightly mentioned, the example of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the terror caused there due to nuclear attacks, Team Banyan also realizes the fact that though education and illiteracy and things like that come secondary in situations like that, however, this is not the scenario of the entire world. There are countries which suffer from these issues, and in their priorities, this issue, literacy, hunger, gender equality, these are they comes first, and then there comes an attack of nuclear armament. So it will be wrong to say that nuclear disarmament is the only solution, because taking the example of the entire world, the scenario is not the same as Japan.
Thank you, Team Banyan, and thank you, Narayan. Team Acacia, you have the floor. I do not see any unmuting. If I do not see any unmuting, I will call upon one person. So I have not seen Johan or Radhya go yet. So Johan, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. As the opposition had mentioned that the opposition had mentioned about giving about basic rights for a small girl living in Syria, etc., saying that suffering from hunger, suffering from not proper education, all those facts. So I would like our team would like to ask the opposition something. Now, the question is that, do you think giving a country like Syria, giving them nuclear weapons, would help such a child achieve her dreams?
Thank you, Team Acacia. Team Banyan, you have the floor. That was Johan from Acacia. We have Narayan from Banyan, who's unmuted himself.
Greetings. Definitely about the example that you stated, that having nuclear weapons, whether it will help the girl in Syria or not. What my team member wanted to speak and wanted you to interpret was that even though nuclear disarmament may be implemented and throughout the world nuclear arms may be confiscated, that wouldn't guarantee the fact that countries which suffer from extreme poverty or other issues, they will be at peace. Because for world peace, there's a broad spectrum that we have to cover. So that won't be covered even if nuclear disarmament is implemented, because as a world we face several issues and all these issues need to be solved simultaneously, and we cannot prioritize any one issue over the other and leave out any other issues, because all these are interlinked and interconnected. So we still have to focus on poverty and other issues even though nuclear disarmament will be implemented.
Thank you. That was literally just on time. Thank you, Team Banyan. Team Acacia, your response?
Yes, so as you mentioned, poverty, there is about 34.8 billion that USA invests in the military arsenals and creating of nuclear weapon. And yeah, there is no, we cannot confirm that much of the amount of money can be used or will be donated or directed towards the poverty issues. But they're wasting so much money on arsenals which could be used to eradicate illiteracy or even those help people in Syria. So why not stop the creation of weapons?
All right. Thank you, Team Acacia. And for the judges, that was Radhya from Team Acacia. I see Ananya from Team Banyan has raised her hand. Ananya, your time starts.
Thank you, ma'am. So with respect to that, I'd like to repeat my point that even if we disarm the nuclear weapons, the fund which is invested in nuclear arms is still not sure to reach the people who are vulnerable to issues like hunger and illiteracy. Because in a place, ma'am, we're in a place, corruption and where there are no strict policies to supervise the direction in which the funds are going, we cannot guarantee that the fund will go in the direction. Even if we disarm the nuclear weapons, who takes the guarantee that the fund invested in these weapons will directly reach the people who are vulnerable to such issues? Ma'am, that is the fact which we are stating. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Banyan. Team Acacia, you have the floor.
Honorable opposition team, I would like to speak.
Okay, that is Evangeline from Team Acacia. Evangeline, you have the floor.
Okay. Honorable opposition team, I do not understand, we cannot comprehend how you forget the fact that nuclear disasters like the Chernobyl or Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or even the Fukushima, which was not really an attack, but just a natural disaster leading to the bursting of the power plant. In order to meet these disasters, countries have to spend a lot of money, and that is further bringing down their economy, which they could have used wisely in order to support your, as you guys said, about gender equality and education and food crisis and other stuff. Now, these nuclear weapons and nuclear power plants are, are just there to give, these disasters are leading to more avoidable expenses to the country.
Thank you, Evangeline. Team Daniel, you have the floor.
Greetings again.
That's Narayan from Team Banyan.
Ma'am, to answer your question, Team Banyan agrees with the fact that nuclear disarmament forms a very big base to solve issues like world peace and disrupting world peace. But again, the fact comes that nuclear disarmament at no point of time will guarantee that even if the country may prevent huge disasters like the ones you mentioned, that point of funds will be used again to benefit the citizens. Even though the country uses them, again, the fact comes that examples around the world show that even if we can confiscate nuclear arms, that amount of money is not often used in protecting vulnerable people. Rather, it is used in buying and purchasing of other armed weapons, which again the country uses for its defense. So nuclear disarmament will guarantee world peace to an extent, but it won't make sure that the world peace that will be there after nuclear disarmament, that will be permanent. And
Your time
that
is
makes
up. I am sorry. I need to cut you off. Team Acacia, you have the floor.
Good evening.
That is Johan from Team Acacia.
The opposition has mentioned a lot about government corruption and that the governments of different countries won't take proper care if we give that money to them. But we would like to ask the opposition a question, saying that why can't we give these funds to an independent organization like the UN, or to organizations within the UN like the FAO or UNICEF? Won't these organizations help the different countries, not just one country? Can't they distribute this money to different countries in order to solve these problems? Or is there corruption in the UN also?
Thank you, Johan. I see Ananya has raised her hand from Team Banyan. Ananya.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So the fact comes that providing funds to the UN, definitely, sir, definitely. And by stating the fact that there is a lot of corruption in the government, our team has never mentioned the fact that the entire government is corrupt. It is the power lies in the hand of the youth. They have to choose the right leaders, and the power comes by sensitization of the youth. We need to sensitize the youth. We need to educate them. We need them to exercise their rights properly in the right direction as to whom should they vote. And so again, UN and the other organizations that are working in order to eradicate nuclear armament and all these issues, definitely, sir, definitely. The world has to be one. The world has to be one in order to eradicate nuclear armament, in order to eradicate conflicts, hunger, illiteracy. Without global partnerships, sir, there is no way we can unite the world and make it a terrorism-free or a nuclear-free world. So, thank you.
Thank you. You are just on time. Team Acacia, you have the floor.
Yes.
Evangeline from Team Acacia.
Just now, my opposition team member had spoken about eradicating terrorism and other things. Honorable team member, how could you forget that the existence of nuclear weapons, what if it just goes in the hands of terrorist organizations who would sacrifice their own lives to kill millions of people? Can we take a chance like that? Are you putting in stake lives of millions of people without disarming the nuclear weapons, just so that a terrorist organization can steal it and kill millions?
Thank you, Evangeline from Acacia. I see Ananya from Banyan has raised her hand. Ananya.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, again, I never mentioned that it is necessary that we'll eventually provide these arms to the terrorist groups or the non-violent, non-state actors. Never did I mention this fact. And ma'am, also, you said that what if these weapons reach? Ma'am, the what if should not come. We cannot entertain any false happenings in such a critical and such a sensitive weapon. Like, you cannot think of, there has to be a strict supervision, there has to be strict policies in order to control these arms to be where they should be. So yes.
Thank you very much, Team Banyan. Team Acacia, you have the floor.
Honorable opposing
Yes,
team, I did not, we did not mention that the government will give the nuclear weapons to the terrorist organizations. What we meant was the terrorist organization can easily steal these things. Not exactly the weapon, they can steal the systems, they can hack into the systems. If you had listened to my speech earlier, during my introduction speech, I clearly mentioned that not all countries have a very strong security base protecting these information regarding the nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more rebuttals, so I would like to request someone who hasn't gone from Team Banyan as yet. Maybe Aditya, you have the floor.
I think that we all come down to the point of education, that educating members from the beginning will help us a lot. We know that a lot of terrorist organizations are there and they possess nuclear armaments, but again, training and educating people to know that this is not good for the society, not for the people too. So we can say that educating people from the beginning will help us that the terrorism should not grow, because as the terrorism will grow, the weapons will automatically grow. So we need to educate people so that they know what is right and what is thing, and they do work for the welfare of the society.
Thank you, Aditya. That was Aditya from Banyan. Team Acacia, you have the floor.
Considering the previous arguments,
That's
surely it might
Jocelyn
not be
from Team Acacia. Sorry, Jocelyn. Jocelyn from Team Acacia, you have the floor.
Surely disarmament might not be the only route to world peace, as the opposition team is arguing, but we're discussing about nuclear proliferation over here and how it affects world peace, and is it necessary for world peace? So obviously, like, we do not know, there are a lot of problems that can be fixed, but it takes time, it takes progress. Development and world peace is always step-by-step process. So why don't we take eliminating nuclear arsenals as the first step towards development and world peace? And my point is, our team's point is that nuclear proliferation is not necessary, and we can disarm it and use the funds for equality and other pressing global issues to make sure people can raise their voices and leaders can be challenged.
Thank you very much. Team Banyan, someone who hasn't spoken. Yes, Vaishnavi.
Greetings, ma'am. Our team never did mention that we don't want nuclear disarmament to be done. How can you make so sure that even after nuclear disarmament, the money will not be used to buy new weapons, like the normal weapons which were used before nuclear armament? How can you make sure that they'll not buy the new weapons like that?
Thank you very much, Team Banyan. Okay, this is to inform you that this is the last set of rebuttals. So Team Acacia, you have the floor, your last rebuttal.
Good evening.
Yes, that's Johan from Team Acacia. Your time starts now.
Yes, so the opposition had mentioned about things that the government should take care of their nuclear weapons. The government should protect their nuclear weapons and take care of them. But in many parts of the world, including many developed countries, there have been a lot of cases in which the government has not taken proper care of the nuclear weapons. For example, I would like to remind the opposition about the 1961 Goldsboro B-52 crash, in which 4 nuclear weapons were accidentally hit the state of North Carolina, and luckily did not explode. But what if these weapons had exploded on the state of North Carolina? Who would be responsible for it? The US government, right? So I don't see that governments are taking care of their own nuclear weapons and can stop nuclear weapons from falling into the hands of terrorists if they are dropping nuclear weapons basically on their own country.
Thank you very much. Team Acacia, Team Banyan, you have the final rebuttal.
So to finally clear out things, our team does support nuclear disarmament, but speaking that nuclear disarmament is the only, and I repeat, the only solution that will guarantee world peace is to a certain extent a false statement, as there are issues which have nowhere which are nowhere linked to nuclear disarmament and still affect and disrupt world peace on a global level in our society today. Nuclear disarmament can form the base of the solutions that are yet to come. But as the proposition mentioned, that global peace is a step-by-step process, and we cannot ignore or leave any step behind to achieve a permanent global peace, which includes steps other than nuclear disarmament, which involves the funds and the capital of the country going into constructive purposes, which will not be guaranteed by only and only nuclear disarmament. So our team does support nuclear disarmament, but at the same time, it also reminds the panel of the other steps that the proposition might have overlooked.
Thank you very much to both the teams. And by the way, that was Narayan from Team Banyan who gave the last statement. I would now give about a minute or so to our judges to finalize their marks for the introduction and rebuttals of the round. And in the meantime, I would request that Team Acacia and Team Banyan switch off their cameras as we begin the second segment. So if Team Mangrove and Team Calf could please switch on your cameras. Yes, Bishop Swing.
On my computer, I have the pictures of everybody, but I don't have the ballot. Do I get off of this and get onto the ballot thing?
If you have written down your marks on a piece of paper, then
right.
Yeah, then you would be able to just tabulate it back in, because our team would be able to put that in.
So I leave this, go to the next thing, and come back to this.
You can switch your tab. You don't have to leave the meeting. You can switch your tab, if that makes sense. You can just click on the Google and then go to the tab and put it in, if that helps out. If not, I can help you out in the other way. But if you have your marks written down, then at the end of the debate, we can put that in manually.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Bishop Swain. Awesome. So we have the 1 minute that has passed. All right. So I see the teams from Team Ka and Team Mangrove are ready. All right. Yes, Ananya, you have your hand raised.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt in the proceedings. I wanted to clarify a doubt.
Yeah.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, this rebuttal round was it this way that the Team Acacia would ask us and we would answer, or was it like we had to answer and we had to question back as well?
What you guys did is perfectly fine. Don't worry.
Ma'am, can I ask one more question if you don't mind?
Sure.
Ma'am, would we get an opportunity to question the team?
You will not, but in your concluding remarks, you can definitely make your last statements that question the opposing team. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, ma'am, sure, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Team Mangrove and Team Calf, are you ready? Yes, okay, I see thumbs up and I see yeses. Great. So once again, please wave when I call out your name. So from the members of Team Mangrove are, we have Jim, Maisha, Farhan, and Mohammed Tahmidul. Okay, from Team Mangrove, Jim and Maisha will give the introductory remarks, and Farhan and Mohammed Tahmidul will give the concluding remarks. The members of Team GAF are Nuha, Ashley, Veer, and Mahir. Again, Nuha and Ashley will give the introductory remarks, and Veer and Mahir will give the concluding remarks. Judges, are you good to go?
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So, yes.
Who was the first speaker? Who was the first speaker?
So we are starting with Team Mangrove. So in the introduction, we have Jim and then Maisha, who will give the introduction.
I'm showing Abid.
Yes, that's Abid. That's his first name. So for the sake of clarity, it's Abid who is going first.
Abid.
Yes. Jim, I'm referring to you as your first name since that's on the list. Okay. So Senator Roche, Bishop Swing, Christopher, Madam Kitagawa, are we ready to go?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Great. All right. So we shall start with Team Mangrove. You have 5 minutes for your introduction, and your time starts now.
Mr. Speaker, peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. The true essence of Ronald Reagan's statement can only exist in a world which understands that peace, which is maintained with deterrence and a fear of complete annihilation, is a form of peace that is transient and susceptible to even the most minor form of human error. At this very moment, we are living in a world where millions of innocent lives are at the hands of a red button, a world where a pretense of peace exists by pointing nuclear weapons at even the most friendliest of nations, a world where conflict is avoided for the fear of the apocalypse, a world where the very definition of world peace is masqueraded by fear and terror. Taking the extremities of the status quo into account, side proposition believes the idea of nuclear deterrence is fundamentally flawed and the threat to the very existence of humanity. Therefore, we believe nuclear disarmament is a necessity and the only route to attain world peace to its truest extent. In this debate, side proposition seeks to prove 3 key things. First, why the cardinal nuclear theories, 1, MAD or mutually assured destruction and nuclear deterrence are flawed and create an unsustainable form of security. 2, how nuclear weapons escalate other forms of international violence. And finally, why the existence of such weapons are principally unjust. Before moving on to a first argument, we would want to make clear that we are not going to argue about the feasibility of nuclear disarmament. We acknowledge that 100% nuclear denuclearization is not possible in the near future, but we should move towards that goal as much as possible, because the bigger the nuclear stockpiles, the higher the degrees of the harm that we mentioned exist. Now, in our first argument, we'll be explaining the futility of MAD or mutually assured destruction. Firstly, we need to understand what is MAD. MAD is a doctrine of military strategy in which a full-scale use of nuclear weapon by opposing sides would cause the complete destruction of both the attacker and the defender. We will show you how this entire theory is flawed based on the 3 assumptions of its functionality. First, the assumption of a second strike capability. Second, the assumption of perfect detection. And third, the assumption of perfect rationality. The assumption of second strike is flawed because it becomes pointless if the first strike attacks and completely decapitates the strike of the nuclear arsenal of the defending country. The perfect detection is flawed in the sense that there are no perfect framework to detect the incoming bombs. And finally, perfect rationality is flawed in the sense that it assumes that the decision maker will tap the red button with a complete rational sense of mind. Here we prove to you with our first argument that how MAD is a flawed statement. Thank you.
The second argument, how nuclear deterrence is just a myth, will point out its futility based on the existing premises. Premise number 1, nuclear weapons will keep the peace and deter war. But there is no concrete precedence of nuclear weapons being used to prevent, resolve, or deter conflicts. Although the successes of nuclear deterrence are speculative, its failures are concrete. For instance, while possessing the nuclear weapons, the US has fought wars in Korea, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and even lost war in Vietnam. And Russia has invaded Afghanistan and Ukraine. And Argentina attacked the British-owned Falkland Islands, even though the British was a nuclear power. Meaning, conflicts still exist and nuclear weapons failed to resolve or deter these and have maintained no peace. Premise 2, violence against civilians is militarily decisive. The premise assumes that the deterrents work because it assumes that the threats to harm civilians matter. But in retrospect, we have seen how in England, they didn't surrender after an estimated death of 60,000 people in city bombings. Numerous German cities were destroyed and 66 Japanese cities were destroyed in 1943, in 1945. If bombing cities was decisive, Germany and Japan would have surrendered sooner. Premise 3, that deterrence works since there has been no nuclear war. However, just because there was no war between the Soviet Union and the Atlantic Treaty powers since 1945, while both sides possessed nuclear weapons, doesn't mean that the second was the cause of the first. Some scholars even suggest that the Japan surrender was not due to the atomic bombings, but came about because of the Soviet invasion 2 days later. Meaning, the weapons are not militarily decisive and haven't stopped conflicts, neither has any concrete evidence of stopping the war. Final argument is how the existence of these weapons are immoral. We believe if something is immoral to do, then it is also immoral to threaten. Nuclear warfare is unique in its effect of destruction. It intrinsically indiscriminate and largely uncontrollable and causes deaths of countless of civilians. The effects continue to exist through generations through radioactively contaminated materials. We reject nuclear strikes because they rob their victims, fellow human beings, of human qualities by subjecting them to unspeakable inhumanity. These weapons are instruments of mass murder, unparalleled to human history, and without disarmament, we believe there is no way to achieve the world peace. Thank you.
Are just on time. Thank you to Team Mangrove. To just reiterate to our judges, that was Abid and Maisha on your scoring sheets who just spoke. Thank you, Team Mangrove. Team Ghaf, you now have 5 minutes for your introduction. Your time starts now.
Deterrence is the art of producing in the mind of the enemy fear of attack. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen. The motion that we are debating today is that nuclear disarmament is the only route to world peace, and we disagree with that motion for multiple reasons. Firstly, the motion states that despite all the advancements that we've made, despite all the endeavors that we've made towards world peace until now, despite everything that the United Nations has done, the proposition is saying that we cannot even be on the path to world peace, that we cannot even get started on this path until and unless we disarm all our nuclear weapons. The proposition states that only and only then, according to them, will our peace efforts work. And we disagree with that rhetoric for three major reasons. Firstly, we believe that nuclear weapons, when they're used as deterrents and not necessarily in the form of an actionable weapon, only as deterrents, they have actually historically improved the state of world peace. It is because of the threat of nuclear war that no country wants to be part of. No country wants to be part of a nuclear war. For this reason, we can finally stop thinking about war at all, and we can finally start negotiating. Nuclear weapons have actually opened the door and enabled us to make reform in the social, political, economic world, which is where the real problem lies. That is what actually leads to peace. Secondly, we will prove to you that international treaties that call for nuclear disarmament, that call for non-proliferation, are ultimately ineffective. This is because most states that own nuclear weapons have not signed and ratified these treaties. This is a clear sign that we as an international community are not ready to simply drop our guards. Any country that chooses to do that now would be leaving their populations open to potential nuclear attacks. The only way to get past this notion of mistrust is if we all have equal defense, is if we all have an equal stake. And this is exactly why we are able to have peace talks in the first place. Thirdly, we'll move on to our most important point in this debate, that we are already on the path toward peace. Before the nuclear age, there was chaos, destruction, wars, and countries were at each other's throats. However, after the nuclear age, people at last opened their eyes to the consequences of war in general. The fact of the matter is that we have not seen a major world conflict for more than half a century. And that is no coincidence. Instead, what we are seeing is reform in education, in human rights, and sustainability in the environment. The world has never been more peaceful than it is right now. And that is because nuclear weapons are on the table. Thank you.
I strongly believe that nuclear weapons are capable of establishing a role in world peace. Considered to be the most destructive instruments ever invented, they represent the ultimate defense of the nation. Combined with diplomacy and conventional military capabilities, nuclear weapons have helped to avoid a large-scale conflict between leading world powers for over 50 years. To begin with, history proves that the nuclear weapons have brought credible deterrence to prevent an all-out war. During the Cold War in 1947 to 1991, the United States and the Soviet Union each built a stockpile of nuclear weapons. However, due to the threat of mutual destruction, neither country went into full-blown war because they knew that nuclear war would cause huge devastation, leading to more deaths. Instead, they fought in much smaller proxy wars, which were relatively less harmful. In this way, the presence of nuclear weapons deterred the possibility of what may have been a full-blown war between two superpowers. Cuban Missile Crisis ended in 1962 with a peaceful negotiation as countries involved were superpowers USA and Soviet Union. Because they both possessed nuclear weapons, and this was the reason for the Cuban Missile Crisis, the thought of global nuclear war caused both leaders to pull back from the brink and helped attain peace. And this is a way of how nuclear weapons would bring deterrence, and so the crisis ended peacefully. India, China, and Pakistan have fought 6 wars from 1948 to 1999. Though China had nuclear weapons from 1964, India and Pakistan tested nuclear weapons in 1998. And because of nuclear power, these 3 countries are at peace. Though there are minor border skirmishes, a full-blown war is ruled out due to nuclear weapons power, which doesn't affect a whole country by causing destruction, and it is a way to enforce world peace. Nations like North Korea can bring superpowers to negotiating table due to the fact that they are nuclear powered. Today's nuclear weapons have the ability to fly over 1,000 miles to strike a target with precision. It's not like the 1940s when bombers carried the weapons with an entire flight crew. Having nuclear weapons is a way for countries to be safe. Therefore, it can be said that nuclear weapons help avoid full-blown out war and helps maintain peace.
Thank you, Team Ka. Okay, so just to reiterate to our judges, that was Nuha and Ashley from Team CAF who just spoke. Are the judges okay? Do you have any queries before we start the rebuttal round? No, I see head shakes. All right, great. Thank you to Team Mangrove and Team CAF for the introductions. We shall now begin the rebuttal round. As I stated in the first segment, you have 1 minute per team to make your point. So Team Mangrove, your time starts now. Yes, Farhan, I see your hand raised.
All right, so I have 2 rebuttals. Firstly, they talk about how nuclear weapons deter war because they're not willing to go, they're not in general not willing to go to war because they are afraid of nuclear annihilation. But we think that's not the case. Countries don't usually go to war against other countries because it's simply not economically worth it, not because of nuclear deterrence. But secondly, they talk about how other countries generally fight proxy wars. We think proxy wars are far more devastating. People are dying in Syria and Yemen, and all of these are proxy wars, and the deaths are in millions. And we don't think conventional warfare between 2 powerful countries generally escalate to the point where they cause deaths of billions. We think neutral ground is problematic, and they need to address this to start off with, because they conceded the fact that this is caused by the existence of nuclear deterrence.
Thank you. For the judges, that was Farhan from Team Mangrove. So yes, Team Ghaf, you now have the floor.
I'd like to take that. Nuha?
Yes, so judges, that is Nuha from Team Ghaf. Nuha, you have the floor.
Right. Thank you. So Team Proposition stated that countries just don't want to go to war in general because it wastes funds, but you contradicted that in your next statement when you said that people fight proxy wars. Well, the fact of the matter is that the world is not pacifist, unfortunately, not yet. We are still fighting wars, unfortunately, and countries still do go to wars, and that is why it is better to have nuclear weapons and to deter wars that happen on a smaller scale. Now, the second point you mentioned was about proxy wars. You said the proxy wars are worse than nuclear wars, but that is entirely false. Proxy wars have, we are not saying that proxy wars are not fatal. We know that we do not support having any wars at all. However, proxy wars, the death toll that happens in proxy wars are much, much, much lower than anything that happens in relation to nuclear war, and world leaders know that. And that is why That is why proxy wars were a far better alternative than having a full-blown nuclear war, which would be worse for the entire world.
Thank you, Noah. Exactly on time. Okay, Team Mangrove, you have the floor.
I'll go.
Yes, Maisha. So judges, that is Maisha from Team Mangrove. Time starts now.
The entire opposition case is based on how nuclear deterrence poses a threat, but this threat doesn't really work in saving wars. We do concede that wars will exist in both worlds, but in their world, they say deterrence as a positive value. We don't think that's true because it didn't work in case of the Vietnam War, where US lost in spite of being the nuclear power, or didn't work in Korea where the war was a tie. So these threats do not really matter. At the end of the day, wars will exist, but nuclear deterrence does not add any positive value.
Thank you very much, Maisha from Mangrove. Team Ghaf, you have the floor. Yes, I see Veer's hand raised. So judges, that is Veer from Team Ghaf. You have the floor.
So ideas about eliminating the bomb are as old as the bomb itself. Yet the world has enjoyed more years of peace since the Second World War. Firstly, this was to answer your question. My second point was stated in Speaker 1's speech, where he stated that conflicts are avoided by the theory of total apocalypse. This is contradicted when Speaker 2 says that there's no proof where bombs deter conflicts. Well, the teams have just contradicted, the members of the teams have just contradicted themselves over here.
Thank you, Veer. Team Mangrove. Yes, I see Abid has unmuted himself. For the judges, that's Abid from Team Mangrove. You have the floor.
We don't entirely understand the opposition's accusation as to how we've contradicted ourselves in case of deterring conflict. Our second speech has clearly showed you how the myth of deterrence of nuclear weapons exists, with constant examples of how nuclear bombs are how nuclear bombs fail to deter, how nuclear bombs establish an IWAS deterrence in cases with various examples. Secondly, they are saying that nuclear bombs should exist because there is a precedent of peace. Understand that nuclear warfare is completely unprecedented, and this world cannot survive in an even if circumstance where a nuclear war might exist. Understand, in case of the Cold War, there were multiple instances of almost nuclear war, which could lead to complete annihilation. I want to ask the opposition side, what are their plans if nuclear war is initiated in this world?
Thank you very much, Abid. Just to reiterate, that was Abid from Mangrove. Team Ghaf, you have the floor. I see. I will give the floor to Mahir because he has not spoken as yet. That judges, that is Mahir from Team Ghaf. You have the floor.
Well, the consequences of a nuclear attack are not what we are here to discuss today. What team opposition would like to bring to notice is how it is that team proposition has painted nuclear weapons as somewhat inconsequential, yet also chooses to paint them as these weapons of mass destruction that will mean our imminent downfall, when in fact that is something that is a huge hole left in their argument. Additionally, we would like to point out how in Team Proposition's first speech, they agreed that dismantlement was not in fact plausible or possible. Now, does Team Proposition often choose to debate or have agreements about things that are not probable, when in fact the entire argument that Team Proposition has today is that this is the first step in achieving world peace? If it is not possible, then is Team Proposition simply saying that world peace is in fact not possible?
Thank you, Mahir. Team Mangrove, you have the floor.
All right, can I speak?
That is Farhan from Team Mangrove.
All right. They cannot compare the devastation of proxy wars to the devastation of nuclear warfare, because nuclear wars never existed. Our arguments were to say that nuclear deterrence in and of itself enables proxy wars to exist. And we think in a world where nuclear weapons exist, it is more probable that nuclear warfare would exist, because we have already pointed out there were several close calls during the Cold War that could have escalated into nuclear warfare. In a world where nuclear disarmament is carried out to a much larger extent, we believe we decrease the possibilities of creating a nuclear war, and also we disable countries to have proxy wars to begin with, because they need to think about their own security before fighting for resources. That is what we meant by wars are not economically worth it in our world.
Thank you, Farhan. I see Ashley from Team GAF. Judges, that is Ashley, who will be speaking now. Ashley, you have the floor.
So you were saying about the Cold War, what happened, like because of, and nuclear warfare would be there today. Now, after nuclear weapons were invented, there had been a less chance of war, and wars have been prevented. Like, for example, like we don't have a world war anymore. So because when the nuclear weapons was invented, it had the capability to end a World War II. Now you were talking about Cold War. So what happened in Cold War was that both the superpowers involved were United States and Soviet Union. They both possessed nuclear weapons, and they did not go into an all-out war because they knew that nuclear war would cause huge devastation and would lead to more deaths. Instead, they fought in a much smaller proxy wars, which could be less harmful, like instead of a nuclear warfare. Like what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki attack, like more than 1 million people had died due to the nuclear bombing in Japan.
Okay, thank you. Your time is up. Great timing. Okay, from Team Mangrove, your rebuttal, please.
Kaikasha, I have a question. I'm really sorry.
Yes. Yes.
In case Team Mangrove, is it okay if we could ask a rebuttal so that Team Mangrove could respond?
We would want Team Mangrove to state something, and then you can ask your question to them after.
Yeah,
all right, Team Mangrove, if no one has raised their hand, I will pick on someone to ask. Maisha, you have the floor.
So their entire case is based, so the previous speaker talked about how the Cold War didn't escalate to a nuclear war because of the nuclear deterrence. But all these examples are based on the assumption that nuclear deterrence was the reason, but there is no concrete evidence of showing the concrete relation between nuclear deterrence to the war. There might have been other reasons, other geographical or other political reasons why they did not go to a full-out or full-scale nuclear war. So just stating that nuclear deterrence was the reason doesn't add any value to this debate.
Thank you. That was Maisha from Team Mangrove. Yes, Nuha from GAF, you have the floor.
Thank you. Team Opposition said that there was no concrete evidence. This is entirely false. The countries have stated, and the entire reason the deterrence doctrine is a thing in the first place is because of the Cold War. It's because this was studied. And the only reason that the countries did not go into full war, they could have put their guns, they could have put their military tanks, but they did not, because they knew they both had nuclear weapons, and that is the only reason that they withdrew. And this was a studied, this is a historical fact. The only reason they did that was because of nuclear disarmament. In turn, we'd like to ask you a question. You did state in your speech that when the MAD doctrine is flawed, the MAD doctrine is flawed when leaders are not rational, but the alternative to leaders not being rational is dictatorship, guns, missiles, ballistic missiles, and countries having nuclear weapons right now do have stable leadership, and that is the reason that we are not seeing these attacks. So, what do Team Opposition have to say about that?
Thank you, Team GAF. You have the floor. Team Mangrove.
Can I respond? Farhan.
Yes, Farhan. Judges
So
said
I
Farhan
think-
from Mangrove.
So I think firstly, the reason why the world never ended up going into full-scale warfare was because of the fact that in most instances, it was because of army officials who defied the orders of their seniors. For example, the case of Vasily Akhirpov, right? He defied the orders of his commander and did not press the nuclear button. And that's why we still are alive today and we did not escalate into full-scale warfare. And most of the instances of warfare avoidance, nuclear warfare avoidance, were denials of carrying out order. But secondly, we think more often than not, it is the very assumption in itself, or the mad doctrine, hinges on very, very small mistakes. One small mistake can devastate the the total status quo to begin with, right? And that we don't think we should. Our lives do not need to hinge on a tiny string that can tear any moment.
Thank you very much, Team Mangrove. Team Kaf, that was Farhan, by the way. Team Kaf, you have the floor. I see Veer has raised his hand. Judges, that is Veer from Team Kaf. Veer?
Kekishan.
Yes, sorry.
Maher has not spoken yet from the second.
He has. He just spoke a few minutes ago.
Can I see his face?
Maher, can you wave your, I'll pin your video actually. Maher, that is Maher.
Can he raise his hand?
Yes, Maher, can you raise your hand?
It's not showing on my screen.
Are you able to see him now, Senator Roche?
Maher.
Yes, Maher is waving his hand.
No, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, Maher is the person in a blue, I think it's blue coat and blue tie, and he has Maher Gidwani Ghaf written on it. So Maher, keep waving your hand. Sorry, the Zoom thing is really confusing, so I apologize for that.
Hello.
Yes, Maher, actually speak. Then you would be able to come on camera.
That's Maher. I see. Okay.
Great. Yes. So Senator Roche, it's all good.
Yep.
All right. Great. So Veer, you have the floor. So once again, judges, it's Veer from Team Kaf.
So even though the proposition discusses about the consequences of war and a nuclear war, but our team would like to pose a question to the proposition. Now, achieving a world free of nuclear weapons is easier said than done. There's no guarantee that a global zero world will be peaceful. There's no big bang solution to nuclear disarmament. According to evidence, a US national security leader, Sam Nunn, compares nuclear disarmament to climbing a mountain, with the summit beyond our grasp. So as romantic as there's a dream of a world without nuclear weapons, so how there are many reasons that reduce the idea of complete nuclear disarmament to just a fantasy. So how does the proposition respond to that?
Thank you, Team Kaf. Team Mangrove, you have the floor. Yes, I see Abid has unmuted himself. So that's Abid from Team Mangrove. You have the
Funny how team opposition uses analogies like climbing a mountain. Understand that in your world where you are not making a nuclear disarmament feasible, there will be no mountains. The world that you are debating in completely depends on this one string, that is nuclear warfare. Understand, we have repeatedly explained in our first speech that how we will not argue regarding feasibility, because we will try our best to achieve that goal. The debate here is not explaining to you the policies that go into nuclear disarmament. The debate is to prove to you why nuclear disarmament is absolutely necessary and why it is the only route to world peace. Understand, if we are going to debate regarding feasibility, there would be no debate to begin in the first place. You are supposed to show us your contingency plans. You are supposed to show us how you are going to survive a fallout shelter. You are supposed to show us how you are going to survive in a post-nuclear war state. We would like to push this burden to the opposition side and receive some answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on time. So we have time for 3 more statements. So this will be the 4th one actually. So Team Kaf, you have the floor. Yes, I see Ashley's hand raised. Ashley from Team Kaf, you have the floor.
So you were saying that nuclear disarmament cannot lead to war, is the only way to world peace. Well, as we all said, nuclear disarmament is not the only way to world peace, and it cannot solve each and every problem. Now today, with the nuclear weapons, we have prevented an all-out war. And this has also helped in developing our environment and society, making it more peaceful and better than the way it was in the 20th century. So we believe that nuclear disarmament is really ineffective to world peace. And so that it is really required to prevent an all-out war so that other factors of the world will not be affected.
Thank you, Ashley from Mangrove. Ashley from CAF. My apologies. Team Mangrove, you have the floor. I have not heard Tamhidul speak, so I'm going to give Tamhidul the floor. So judges, that's Tamhidul from Team Mangrove.
Okay, so the first response to their statement that we have is that they have assumed that complete nuclear disarmament essentially means we stop nuclear power plants and other essential things as well, which is not true. Nuclear disarmament essentially only means disarming those countries with imposing them not having nuclear weapons. But the second response we have to this is understand that nuclear deterrence is an ineffective, unlawful, and utterly immoral strategy in principle. That is to say, even in our worst case, if they try and prove to us why this is not feasible, they will not get away with just questioning about this, because in principle, a single individual does not deserve to have this much power to make the whole world vanish in just a single step of a button. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamidul. Okay, I'm going to give the floor to Mahir from Team CAF. So judges, that is Mahir from Team CAF. Mahir, you have the floor.
Now, team proposition is operating far beyond any realm of logic that team opposition is familiar with, in that they have explicitly stated that how proxy wars, because they do not depend exactly, or because they do not have any concrete evidence, that is in fact evidential of the complete opposite of what team opposition is trying to tell them. They suggested, in fact, that in nuclear weapon stations that mistakes were possible, and that in fact weapons could sort of just launch themselves. Now, all of this is incredibly impractical, and as something that they highlighted in one of their speeches about how we're not giving them the apt amount of solution, this is something that will be done or addressed in our fourth speech today, but it does not in any way make their case about how nuclear weapons being disarmed is the argument for them, because what they have to argue is that that is the first step to achieving world peace. Now, if they say that that is something that is not even remotely feasible, then we are arguing that, in fact, world peace is inachievable, and that is not a sound or reasonable argument for them to make.
Thank you, Mahir. Exactly on time. Okay, we have two more arguments, rebuttals from each of the teams. So Team Mangrove, you have the floor.
All right, can I take the floor?
Yes, so that's judges, that's Farhan from Team Mangrove.
All right, recognize the kind of problems that you talk about that are impediments to world peace. For example, poverty, hunger, lack of education, etc. Recognize that in regions of proxy war, this violation of human rights is to its worst extent. And in your speech, you have conceded the idea that nuclear deterrence is the reason why countries adopt proxy wars. We think that that is a very immoral stance to take to begin with, but please tell us more.
Thank you, Team Mangrove. Team CAF, you have the floor. Nuha. Judges, that is Nuha from Team CAF.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to begin by answering team opposition. They stated that it is an immoral stance to take that proxy wars are better than nuclear war. Well, what they're saying is that we should summon nuclear weapons, that some countries will do it, some countries will not. And we'll go into nuclear war, and that is better for team proposition. That is essentially what they're saying. And see, in this case, it is the lesser of the two evils to choose proxy wars, and unfortunately, that is the kind of world that we are living. We are not living in a pacifist world, and for that reason, proxy wars are indeed better than these kinds. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the close calls that team opposition talks about. Nuclear weapons are not hanging on a string. Nuclear weapons have immense safeguards on them, immense safeguards, and the man who prevented nuclear war was not defying orders. 3 people needed to say yes to nuclear war, and the man said, Vasily Arkhipov refused. He refused to authenticate the nuclear weapon going into the nuclear weapon firing. And for this reason, nuclear weapon was stopped. And the problem there was miscommunication. The problem there was not the weapon itself. The problem was miscommunication. But today, we have so many safeguards for nuclear weapons. There's a no first use policy. There's a defense policy. Countries cannot use their nuclear weapons unless and until they are acting in defense. And for this reason, nuclear weapons are entirely safe in today's world. We are not living in the 1960s when nuclear weapons just went off randomly. We are living in the 21st century, and nuclear weapons are entirely under our control. And for this reason, we urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to oppose. We are not on the brink of nuclear war.
Thank you, Nuha from Team CAF. Last statements from Team Mangrove and Team CAF. So Team Mangrove, you have the floor. Yes, Farhan from Team Mangrove.
All right. So recognize that they cannot compare between proxy wars and nuclear wars. And I'm stating that again, because in a world where there are no nuclear weapons, or in a world where there are few nuclear weapons, there can't be a nuclear war. Whereas they've told us that in their world, proxy wars are a thing. But in our world, we make wars not worth it anymore. So therefore, they would have to, they need to think about their own securities before fighting over resources in third world countries, right? But more importantly, recognize the idea that groupthink exists. When there are 10 people who need to give the order of a nuclear strike, if 9 people give an order, it's very hard for that one person to tell you that no, defy the will of the group and go against it, right? So recognize this is a very thin line that we are playing with. So this, we cannot simply take that risk. We need to move towards nuclear disarmament, and that is important.
Thank you very much, Farhan. Right on time. And our final statement from Team CAF. Mahir, you have the floor. Judges, that is Mahir from Team CAF.
What Team Proposition has just argued is that we, as Team Opposition, will not or should not compare proxy wars with nuclear ones. Yet that is something that they have been doing throughout their rebuttals, so there's clearly some sort of miscommunication within them. But see, that is what is being argued here, because we don't have enough evidence or examples of nuclear war. And to state that, in fact, in an event where we have 10 safety checks or 10 individuals who need to be checked before a nuke is fired, then to say that one individual who would not like it fired can somehow be peer pressured into firing a weapon of mass destruction is absolutely absurd. And we on Team Opposition absolutely disagree with that, because that is not a logical stream of argument. And to state that they are now, in fact, banning wars because their world is one completely without wars is, again, just that, ludicrous. Because to state that what they would like is, in fact, a world without wars is to state that there would be one with absolute peace. But that is not the case. That is not a symptom of a world without nuclear weapons. In fact, it could very likely be the opposite, because nuclear wars, and that's our case, deters this.
Thank you very much, Mahir. Right on time. And with that, we come to the end of the rebuttal round for the second segment. Before I start with the concluding statements, judges, do you have any questions before we continue?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, I see no from Bishop Swing, Madam Kiragawa, Senator Roche. Are you okay with everything? Yeah, and Christopher, are you?
Nope, no questions from me.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you so much to Team Mangrove and Team CAF for your introductions and your rebuttals. We shall now have the concluding statements from each of the teams. Once again, I'd like to remind you that you have 4 minutes per team. So we shall start in the order of the teams that we started with anyway. So Team Acacia, you have the floor, and your time starts now.
Ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. We know more about war than we know about peace, more about killing than we know about living. If a situation of conflict was to occur, war will be launched by suicidal little madmen pressing an electronic button. Such a war will not last, and none will ever follow it. There will be no conquerors and no conquest, no poverty or illiteracy, but only the charred bones of the dead. And even if we focused on eradicating all social and economic problems, what is your victory with no survivors? What provokes the use of nuclear weapons? What is the only established defense against nuclear weapons? How do we prevent the use of nuclear weapons? So say we were to trace the roots of the problem, it would be the very existence of nuclear weapons. I can't believe that this world can go on beyond our generation and down to succeeding generations with this kind of a weapon on both sides, poised at each other, without someday some fool or some accident triggering the kind of war that is the end of the line for all of us. It is a pure folly to believe that nuclear weapons are deadly only if they're used. The fact that they exist at all, their presence in our lives will wreak havoc. Nuclear weapons pervade our thinking, control our behavior, enrich our societies. They bury themselves like meat hooks deep in the base of our brains. They are the ultimate colonizers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed a truly fascinating debate tonight regarding nuclear disarmament. We have heard a lot today, but let's look at our history for proof. We shouldn't repeat a disaster in which as many as 190,000 people, possibly even more, were dead or injured in a span of 3.5 days. We shouldn't have a scenario in which nuclear-armed adversaries are essentially toying with millions of people's lives. We shouldn't repeat nuclear arms races in the most delicate and fragile parts of the world today. Although we have come a very long way since then, we would argue, as in the proposition, my team, that the changes world governments have taken and made are simply not enough. There have been repeated incidents of many countries not taking adequate care of their nuclear weapons. The equipment used is too old, or the people taking care of them are simply not qualified. Also, we must stop government spending figures like $355 billion over a period of 10 years on weapons of mass destruction. Instead, state governments should use taxpayer money for more essential services like building schools, roads, infrastructure, and improving the general quality of life instead of destroying it. I would like to end with a quote from Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, who was quoted saying, "Now I have become death, the destroyer of the worlds." Ladies and gentlemen, let's not destroy us. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Acacia. And to confirm with the judges, that was Radhya and Johan from Team Acacia, the first team that spoke. So thank you so much once again, Team Acacia. I now give the floor to Team Banyan. So Team Banyan, your time starts now.
Dalai Lama once said, "If we ask what destroys our inner peace, it is not weapons and external threats, but our own inner flaws like anger." This is one of the reasons why love and compassion is much more important, because they strengthen us. They are a source of hope. We have a long way to go before we are able to hear the voices of everyone on earth. But we believe that providing voices and building bridges is essential for the world peace we all wish for. We look forward to a world founded upon by 4 essential human freedoms. When we, the people of our international community, have created a social order whereby all people enjoy the first 3 freedoms, that is freedom of speech, religion, and from want, then we will have created a society where we can all share in the 4th freedom, that is freedom from fear. Of the many problems we face today, some are natural calamities, and that must be accepted and faced with equanimity. But man-made havoc such as terrorism and guerrilla wars terribly affect peace of the human life. If ignorance and misunderstandings are cleared by the light of the knowledge, and the human life is inspired by the sweetness of love, the world will become a better place to live. We must remember that different religions, ideologies, and political systems of the world are meant for the human beings to achieve happiness. The critical point is that we need to find a peaceful, non-violent way for the forces of freedom, democracy, and moderation to emerge.
Let us all for once close our eyes and put our hands on our hearts and ask ourselves, what kind of nuclear armament did our ancestors possess? None. Even before the invention of these weapons of mass destruction, humans were equally cruel, equally inhumane, and equally brutal. And it is evident from the fact that when we look into the pages of our history, we find that our emperors are judged not on the basis of the values that they indoctrinated, but by the number of battles they won. For example, the Kalinga War, which had huge consequences. I ask you again, what kind of nuclear armament did that battle have? We cannot hide our failures and our vices like greed, selfishness and malcontent behind the disadvantage of technology. And we can definitely not justify taking away a part of our weaponry and guaranteeing it for world peace, which is disrupted by various other reasons today. We need to break down all the barriers of nationalism ever built and lead into a future of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That means that the whole world is but one family. The biggest threat to world peace, I believe, is the fact that the most ferocious and most barbaric battles are fought every day and every year, not with nuclear arms, but with our discriminatory behavior, when there are millions of peoples around the world who are fighting for their rights. That too disrupts world peace on a huge level, and it is one of the biggest consequences of disrupting in world peace. Jimi Hendrix once said, and I'd like to quote, that when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace, unquote. We cannot justify world peace when there are millions out there who have to fight for their existence and who have to fight for their acceptance, and the internal conflicts that persist in countries around the world. They too disrupt peace on a world level. And that is something that cannot be justified by nuclear disarmament. In the end, I want all of you to look within. Peace starts with you. I want you all to think about who loses when you win. Every one of us can pledge to make the world more just and peaceful. But in the end, if there's one thing that guarantees world peace, it is definitely not in surrendering the weapons we fight with, but by eliminating the will to fight. Because until and unless we do not eliminate the will to fight, we will find 1,000,001 reasons to fight each other's with. It is not about nuclear arms. Even before the invention of nuclear arms, humans used to fight each other with sticks and stones. So it is the will that we need to eliminate, not the nuclear arms. With this note, we conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Team Banyan. And to our judges, I would like to reiterate that Aditya and Narayan just spoke from Team Banyan. Before we move on to our next two teams, do any of the judges have any questions? Or are you okay with the names and how everything's progressing? If there are no questions or comments from the judges, then we shall move on to our next team, which is Team Mangrove. From you have the floor. So once again, you have 4 minutes to make your concluding remarks. Team Mangrove, your time starts now.
We recognize that there are political barriers towards denuclearization. However, we can overcome this. We have banned chemical and biological weapons, and the global stockpiles are almost down to zero, despite the fact that both of these weapons can serve as deterrents by crippling enemy resources and killing indiscriminately. We did this because A, it's not distinctive. They can cause gruesome indiscriminate deaths on a massive scale, regardless of the victims being combatants or civilians. B, it defies proportionality of retaliation. And C, they are weapons whose effects cannot be controlled. And therefore, all of these weapons of mass destruction just defy the just war theory. And all of this are applicable to nuclear weapons as well. But secondly, we need to recognize the United States and the Russian Federation have destroyed over 85% of the nuclear stockpile. Denuclearization is a gradual process. If not in the near future, that is 10 years, maybe in 100 years, it's possible. But we believe it is a step that we need to keep on pursuing towards. But secondly, recognize that countries often don't go to war these days because of the intertwined nature of the global economics often makes it not worth it. But when it's worth it, they do. The Indo-China conflict, the Indo-Pak conflict, recognize all of these countries are nuclear power, is worth it because these won't result in economic devastation or full-scale warfare because of the existence of nuclear warheads or whatever. But the victims of these conflicts are innocent civilians or soldiers who have no autonomy. In our world, countries have too much to lose because small aggressions likely to escalate. But more importantly, it is harder for non-nuclear states in proxy wars to retaliate against foreign aggressors with nuclear powers. Such wars are generally fought on resources. State-sponsored attacks would be seen as a direct declaration of war, which happens and causes devastation. And also, most retaliation is in the form of terrorist organizations. This is the reason why countries like Iran have always wanted to comply with denuclearization, that voted to adopt a resolution that established a mandate for nuclear weapons ban treaty negotiations. Nuclear weapon stockpiles provide the biggest threat to world peace in the Middle East and the Korean Peninsula. War constitutes the worst form of human rights abuse that they talk about. It is essential that we stop it. Problems of poverty, healthcare, education, and livable cities, etc. exist because of wars. Wars may not be eradicated, but in our world, it's the risk is not only on civilians but also on people in power, and that is the only justified deterrence for governments that don't care about civilians and kill them in proxy wars. Moving on to that.
Understand, there are only two classes in this debate. One, does nuclear deterrence prevent war or not? And two, is such a suicidal, utterly destructive, and principally immoral option even trustworthy or not? If we prove this to you, we win this debate. Understand, to the first point, just because World War III hasn't broken out yet does not mean nuclear deterrence is playing a successful role in it. Why? India and Pakistan, for instance, are currently engaged in a constant race to be more and more stocked in nuclear weaponry, and such blind faith in nuclear deterrence has led both sides to launch provocative military action in heavily disputed area of Kashmir. What do I mean by this? Essentially, the fact in itself that everybody thinks that nuclear deterrence will stop a war from going full scale is what incentivizes these countries and the people running it in general to go and take more and more risks, which in turn increases proxy wars, increases casualties, and increases the risk we as the general public face. Recognize, for deterrence to work, it has to work all the time without any potential for misconduct and error. The strategy in itself is an extremely irrational one. Why? Unlike conventional war, revenge through nuclear attacks leads to a vast radiated wasteland of nothingness, making the whole decision in itself completely pointless in terms of retaliation and also in terms of effectiveness. Now coming to the second point, is such a suicide or utterly destructive and principally immoral option even trustworthy? Understand that there has been numerous close calls that we've been talking about constantly of potential nuclear war essentially concluding in the end of humanity. They try to downplay this, however they can't. Why? Because majorly these functions happen simply because of malfunction, human error, or misunderstanding. What is common among all these problems? The only common thing among all these problems is that these are things that you cannot control as a community. Hence, the fact that you just give power to these people and you cannot control this in itself is a destructive policy, because essentially at the end of the day, you give the people who run this the power to completely destroy the world. For instance, in 25th October of 1962, we've seen the Cuban Missile Crisis. In March 2016, we've seen 19 airmen from the 90th Missile Wing at AP Warren Air Base under investigation for illegal drug abuse. The conclusion to all of this is simply the fact that you cannot trust the general public with this, you cannot trust an army officer with this, you cannot trust a top tier president with this. And hence, this should be banned once and for all, because we as human beings do not deserve to live in such an insecure state. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Right on time. Thank you, Team Mangrove. So to reiterate to our judges, that was Farhan and Tamhidul from Team Mangrove. And we shall proceed to our last team, which is Team Kaf. So Team Kaf, you have the floor.
Humanity is facing new challenges every day. Our notion of peace is threatened by inequality, racism, xenophobia, and the new evils from the Pandora's box: pandemic, cyber terrorism, financial terrorism. How can we be peaceful when climate change is causing terrifying floods and overpopulation is causing the scarcity of energy, food, and water? I ask you, can disarmament really solve any of these issues? Can you guarantee that a world without nuclear weapons will be peaceful? It wasn't peaceful before the invention of the bomb. Present-day conflict-ridden countries, Sudan, Yemen, do not have any nuclear weapons. On September 11, 2001, when two Boeing 767s burned down the World Trade Center towers, they also burned the illusions that terrorist attacks require, such as nuclear bombs. Disarmament is...
I would like to interrupt. I'm sorry, Veer. We cannot hear you. There's some kind of static noise that is coming from you. I have paused your time, so you're not... don't worry about that. Can you check that? Because
can you hear me now?
Yes, it's much better now.
Can you just tell me where I was at so that I can start from that point?
I do not remember. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And one of your team you out, or you can just start from the beginning of the sentence.
Okay, let's start from the beginning.
Okay, you can start now. I've started your time.
Humanity is facing new challenges every day. Our notion of peace is threatened by inequality, racism, xenophobia, and the new evils box: pandemic, cyber terrorism, financial terrorism. How can we be peaceful when climate change is causing terrifying floods and hurricanes? Overpopulation is causing the scarcity of energy, food, and water. I ask you, can disarmament really solve any of these issues? Can you guarantee that a world without nuclear weapons will be peaceful? It wasn't peaceful before the invention of the bomb. Present-day conflict-ridden countries such as Syria, Sudan, Yemen do not possess any nuclear weapons. On September 11th, 2001, when two Boeing 767s burned down the World Trade Center towers, they also buried the illusions that terrorist attacks require weapons. Disarmament is easier said than done. The knowledge of nuclear fission and fusion is out there. It would probably only take weeks to develop a new warhead. The nuclear genie is out of the bottle, and nothing can force it back. What is peace? Peace is more than just the absence of war. It is also the absence of crime, poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Globalization has divided our societies into winners and losers, creating billionaires on one hand and homeless on the other. Sustainable peace can only be achieved through dialogue and diplomacy. Nobel Peace Prize winner Kofi Annan is a strong advocate for the democratic peace theory. He believes that in democracies, populations will restrain elected leaders as they are reluctant to bear the human cost of war. After all, the real causes of war lie in the untamed human condition. Countries don't go to war, leaders go to war. Peace on earth is our common goal, the guiding star for all our work. We deserve a world where the weak are safe and the strong are just. Well, the good news is the power to create a peaceful world lies within all of us.
Now, as we have asserted to you throughout the course of this debate, the cost of nuclear disarmament is immense. We're not dealing with a world of active nuclear attacks. We're thinking of one beyond Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is a world with its own problems, from the violent protests in America to the attack that just happened in Gaza, of which nuclear weapons have only ever been a symptom of these attacks, that is. Now, one of our options, other than nuclear disarmament, is to bring about true equality between men and women. Countries with 10% of women in the labor force compared with countries with 40% are 30 times more likely to experience internal conflict and to use military force to resolve international conflict, as per the Journal of Peace Research. If we were an equal economy, the results would be $28 trillion, or 26% of the annual global GDP, in less than a decade, citing McKinsey and Company. So there's money to be gained while achieving peace with this solution. Now, according to a survey by the World Bank, and this is my second point, 40% of those who join rebel groups do so because of a lack of economic opportunities. So more equal societies are accompanied by low levels of violence, Nordic countries serving as a prime example of this. Now, the transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor is very key here, with uneducated masses being swayed by the artificially constructed and arbitrary regional or cultural conflicts and enmity, which escalates the need for weapons, nuclear or otherwise. That needs to be dealt with, and it can only be dealt with when there is money being put into education and citizens to have the ability to be better. And finally, as members of Green Hope, we recognize the importance of tackling climate change, which is the other major issue that we as a society deal with. Ecological stress from global warming is proven to exacerbate conflicts over resources like land and water, particularly in East Africa. And the UN Climate Agreement is evidence the world can tackle this and mitigate this crisis, as we cannot do with nuclear weapons, and as discussed by my predecessor. So, global warming affects us all, and it's not a game of chicken, it's one that has already been fired. So instead of spending money on our disarming of weapons, let's spend it on trying not to permanently disable the planet we live on. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you to Team Half. And just to reiterate to the judges, that was Veer and Mahir from Team Half who just spoke. And with that, we conclude our debate. Before we move ahead, judges, are you okay with the names and the markings? Yes? Okay.
Yep.
All right, awesome. All right, so with that, we come to the end of our debate. Thank you so much, teams. This was one of the most engaging debates that I have ever been a part of. Debating virtually is a huge, huge challenge, and you guys did it. So congratulations for that. For, just before we continue with the whole debate, would the judges need a few minutes to go over their marks or enter the marks?
Nope.
All right. Bishop Swing, are you okay with the marks and the scoring?
I can make the marks, but if I leave this screen to go to that other thing that you told where the scorecard is, I'm afraid I'll lose you all. So when do we have to put the marks down?
You know, there's one thing that can be done since our judges will be giving their comments. We can, and you are our final speaker, so you can exit the call, enter the marks, and enter back in, and then we'll be able to hear your remarks for our participants.
That's what I'll do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Swing. And with that, I would now like to request our judges to share their thoughts on today's theme and any suggestions that they would like to give to our young debaters. So we shall start with Madam Hiragawa. Madam Hiragawa, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and I want to express my deepest appreciation to Kekashan, our wonderful debaters, judges, and our audience for taking the time today to address and explore the ways to world peace. With respect to nuclear weapons, I think there is consensus that the sheer magnitude of their destructive force to harm massive numbers of people and our environment makes it very difficult to argue that it is a logical or reasonable way to keep us safe and secure. The fact that we now have 9 nuclear weapon countries, with the possibility of Saudi Arabia becoming a 10th country in the near future to join the nuclear club, according to recent news reports, is pointing the way to a proliferation of these weapons rather than their abolition. We must always remember that war brings not only death, but untold suffering and misery. Many of the survivors of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, called the Hibakusha, have dedicated their lives to tell the stories of their suffering and pain at having lost their loved ones, of having to endure their own pain of suffering from the effects of the radiation on their health, and the utter grief which these bombs rain down upon their lives. Our technological advances have outstripped the development and commitment to our moral, spiritual, and ethical principles and values, which all sacred texts and teachings help us to understand. This is very succinctly articulated in the Golden Rule. And the Golden Rule says very simply, treat others as you would like to be treated. I would like to raise this matter of the ethics and the Parliament of the World's Religions signature document, which is called the Global Ethic. And the Global Ethic has 5 directives, which I would like to share with you very quickly. And number 1 is a commitment to a culture of nonviolence and respect for life. Number 2 is a commitment to a culture of solidarity and a just economic order. Number 3 is a commitment to a culture of tolerance and a life of truthfulness. Number 4 is a commitment to a culture of equal rights and partnership between men and women. Number 5 is a commitment to a culture of sustainability and care for the earth. And at some point in the debate this afternoon, all of these points were covered. So I know that this is resonating within the hearts of all of our debaters. Teaching ourselves about developing values, principles for living, and ultimately the heart of love and caring for each other, which I was very happy to hear some of our debaters raise. All sentient beings and Mother Earth will help us to find abhorrent the development or deployment of any nuclear device that would be antithetical to our core values and principles for living. Therefore, to the debaters who have your lives ahead of you, I encourage you to take first responsibility for the development of your inner character and spiritual life so that you can commit yourselves to live in alignment with your core values. The importance of developing your inner life is ultimately to help you to become a better person and to deepen your heart that you may treat others with respect, kindness, and love. One of the greatest ways that we can move out of self-absorption and pure self-interest and self-centeredness is through Seva. Seva is a Sanskrit word which means selfless service, where you give of yourself, your time, your commitment, and your resources to help others without looking for the return of self-glorification or self-aggrandizement. Mother Teresa said, love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. I think many young people are more and more willing to become activists and to manifest their values and what they truly care about through their activism. This activism, however, must always be undertaken with a view of whether dedicating yourself to this cause or any cause is not predatory or exploitative in nature and does not cause more harm to others. When we truly do Seva, we are putting our love into action that is unconditional. May we all be blessed to move from that place of true love, knowing that we may not live to see the benefits of what our love has brought forth into the world, but knowing that whatever legacy we leave behind, we have given each day along the way as we lived our seemingly ordinary lives, that the presence of the divine hand was present in cultivating the soil of our holy ground upon which we all stand. As I see the fervent dedication of our youth today to devote their time and effort into the examination of this important debate on nuclear weapons and world peace, I am very heartened to know that the future of our world is being placed in very good hands. May your hearts in this and all efforts that you undertake be filled with great kindness and love, even as a single dewdrop on the petal of a flower sparkles with having fulfilled its purpose to give sustenance to something larger than itself. And I wish each and every one of you much success and best wishes that you may live your life as a statement of a legacy to great unconditional love and selfless service to humanity. So thank you very much and congratulations on a very invigorating debate.
Thank you so much, Madam Hiragawa. And as always, you've spoken so many things that resonate with all of us, especially in terms of how respect, kindness, love, and Seva and our legacy that we leave behind of love and kindness is so important, not just for ourselves and our present generations, but for the future generations as well. So thank you once again. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you so much to all our judges for being here today. And we're discussing such an extremely important topic. And before I continue with our next speaker, I'd just like to remind our judges to make sure that all the boxes in the score sheets are filled and that we have the marks like fully ready to go. And Bishop Swing, are you okay with the markings now?
No. I'm having a very tough time doing that. But
one of our team members is gonna help you out with that. I shall let them know just now, so you won't have to face the problem of not getting those scores in. So we shall,
okay.
They will be able to contact you and we'll solve this problem. So please bear with us on this. Thank you so much. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Christopher King. So Christopher, you have the floor. We seem to have lost Christopher. Yes, we see you.
Thank you very much. Your
audio is breaking up. You're unable to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Again, is quite hopefully through what I'm about to say. Thank you so much.
Christopher, we are still unable to hear you. Your audio is breaking up.
moment of faith, and we'll see if.
Okay, we seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties with Christopher. We shall move on to our next judge, but we shall come back to Christopher, and hopefully we'll be able to solve our tech difficulty. So Senator Roche, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Kekachan. And I want to begin by congratulating very warmly all the debaters. I thought you all did a very spirited and informed discussion. And the proposition, those who were debating against the proposition had a more difficult role, I think. And I think they distinguished themselves in the manner in which they presented their arguments. So I too would like to encourage the debaters that we heard today, and by extension, all your colleagues and associates, the young people around the world. There is something happening in the world today, and it's the awakening of a conscience toward how we treat one another in the world and how we treat the planet. And this is a distinguishing mark of our time that sometimes is hard to discern because we're overwhelmed by one peril or catastrophe or confrontation after another. And the absence of strong, vigorous, committed leadership toward integrated solutions for the diverse problems of the planet that have to do with economic and social development and arms control and disarmament, the environmental protection and the advancement of human rights. That agenda, the absence of leaders pushing that integrated agenda is one of the unfortunate hallmarks of our time. And thus it falls to civil society, particularly young people, and we're seeing that now, how they are taking up the mantle and moving forward. This gives me a great deal of encouragement. Now, a few words on nuclear disarmament. It is pretty difficult to argue the case that nuclear weapons are the only way to peace in the 21st century. But I would say that the abolition of nuclear weapons, is a prerequisite to peace in the 21st century. It would be very difficult to have peace if a sustainable peace, if nuclear weapons are maintained, and particularly the manner in which it is now happening, in which we have 13,400 nuclear weapons possessed by 9 countries. And those countries are not participating in the worldwide movement toward the elimination of nuclear weapons. And indeed, the most powerful of the countries, the very ones who sit on the Security Council, and particularly the 3 countries that drive the Security Council, the United States, Russia, and China, are opposing efforts made by people of good faith around the world to eliminate nuclear weapons. And we've seen this movement now in the development of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which was arrived at in 2017. I did think that the speakers this morning should have referred with some more detail toward what is actually going on now in the political arena, because an examination of that helps us to see both the extent of the problem and the route to the solution. So the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons would outlaw nuclear weapons, and it has been signed by 122 states, which is a majority of states in the United Nations. It needs to be ratified before it enters into force. It needs to be ratified by 50 states. It has now been ratified by 43, and thus they're well on the way toward the entry into force of a treaty that will make nuclear weapons illegal. Of course, those countries that continue to resist the treaty and don't sign it will ignore it. Well, are we going to stand by and allow those countries to ignore a new international law coming into place. So here again, we come back to youth and the way in which youth will state clearly to political leaders today, and how they themselves will enter the political arena and become leaders, that youth take a role in changing the attitude of the very culture that we live in. We've lived in a culture of war for years and years and years, but perhaps one might say the last 2 centuries, a culture of war in which militarism and the cost of arms has been outrageous. If you take the United States budget alone, it's completely out of sync with other states. It's so far, it's so much more. So the culture of war is giving way very slowly and gradually to a culture of peace, in which the respect and the tolerance that Audrey spoke about is now being seen and adapted into many organizations of civil society. And so there is a rising level of humanity and civilization moving toward a culture of peace that gives us hope for the future. We are, as I said before, we are dragged down a great deal by the news of the day, but we have to have resilience to recognize that advances have been made toward the reduction and moving toward the elimination of nuclear weapons. That is a struggle that goes on. And again, I congratulate the young people of today that we heard so wonderfully this morning, so well represented, helping to develop a better commonality in our society and moving forward. Kekeshan, congratulations to you and the Green Hope for all you're doing and the debates and the programs that you're putting on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Roche. And thank you once again for your comments, and especially the fact that you said that nuclear weapons are, nuclear disarmament and abolishing nuclear weapons, that's basically a prerequisite to peace. So thank you so much for mentioning that very important point. And you're also right, the opposition today did have a much more difficult job of convincing our judges on their points. But thank you so much for your comments to all of our debaters and participants, and I'm sure they will be able to go a long way with both your comments, Madam Kitagawa's comments and suggestions in heart. So thank you so much for that. I would now like to try again with Mr. Christopher King to check if his audio is working. So Christopher, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's telling me that my internet connection is unstable, so I don't know if you can hear me properly or not, but suffice to say, I would agree. Thank you very much again, Kekeshan, and to Green Hope for inviting UNODA to be on this panel of judges. It was a fascinating debate. I congratulate all of the speakers. You did a wonderful job. As my two other panelists said, you were certainly very passionate about this debate. You argued it very keenly, and I thank you very much for your interest in the subject matter. I would also very much like to echo what the two previous speakers have said about young people. I think the importance of young people on this issue in particular cannot be understated. I think that nuclear disarmament and nuclear weapons and nuclear warfare to a certain extent have gotten lost amidst a huge number of issues that your generation will have to deal with, things like climate change, post-pandemic society, gig economy, all of the things that you as young people will face. But it's important to remember why we think about nuclear weapons in the way we do. And it's important to remember that why for the United Nations since 1946 and the very first General Assembly resolution, nuclear disarmament has been the highest priority. And that's primarily because, as many of the speakers said today, there are no weapons either comparable to nuclear weapons. They are the only weapons that have ever been invented that have existential consequences. That is the potential ability to destroy all life on the planet. Secondly, any use of nuclear weapons would likely lead to a humanitarian catastrophe that no country in the world is able to actually contain or to deal with. These are the two factors that remain why nuclear disarmament will be a mark above. And so for your debate, I think that that is always important to remember. When we talk about nuclear weapons as a prerequisite for world peace, or nuclear weapons as a path to world peace, the reason why is because they are unique in their destructive potential and in their potential to cause humanitarian catastrophes. So that's one reason. I would also agree with my fellow panelists that, of course, you know, we are naturally inclined, I think, to support the proposers of the resolution. So yes, I would add my voice to the opposition for the good job that you did. And certainly in my job, I hear the argument that nuclear weapons have prevented a third world war on a daily basis. It's not an argument that I believe, but it's certainly an argument that I hear, and I congratulate you for the way that you articulated it so well. I want to point out that when we talk about world peace and what we talk about when it comes to nuclear disarmament, it's really important to remember that disarmament is not a means and ends of itself. When the United Nations was founded, disarmament was very much seen as being central to the maintenance of international peace and security. Disarmament is therefore a very critical element of conflict prevention, conflict mitigation, and conflict resolution. And it's really important to think when we talk about world peace, that disarmament is fundamental to achieving it, and particularly nuclear disarmament for the reasons that I stressed. We are going through right now, as Senator Roche, I think, already pointed out, we're going through right now a particularly turbulent times in geostrategic affairs. We're looking at an environment that, as the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs has said, is characterized by distrust and a dearth of dialogue. There is minimal transparency, there is minimal confidence. And at the same time, we are seeing the suite of treaties and instruments that have been created to prevent nuclear war and bring about the elimination of nuclear weapons is being undermined and eroded. While in parallel, nuclear weapons seem to be assuming even greater importance in national security strategies of those who hold them. This is a delicate time, and this is why we need to have debates like this. This is why we need to have education. And again, my office, the Office for Disarmament Affairs, is very much focused on bringing young people into the debates, in empowering young people, in listening to young people, in hearing your voice on innovation. And just today, on International Youth Day, I'm very pleased to announce the launch of the UN 75 Words for Disarmament Youth Challenge, which is a campaign that invites young people around the world to express what disarmament means to you and to your communities in 75 words. Those of you who did rebuttal in less than a minute should have no problem doing this in 75 words. The Disarmament Youth Challenge is being held in commemoration of the 75th anniversaries of the establishment of both the UN, but also the commemoration of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's going to end on the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, which, as many of you may know, is on the 26th of September. And this contest provides an opportunity for young people to think about disarmament not as an abstract concept, but as a practical means to help prevent armed conflict and promote peace and security. I therefore would encourage all of you to participate into it. And if you have any questions, please go and visit the hashtag Youth4Disarmament Instagram. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And I'm sure a lot of our participants today will participate in that. And thank you so much for your comments specifically on education and youth. And as an organization who, as Green Hope, firmly believes in disarmament education, I completely agree that, you know, it's such an important way for us to move forward, to be aware of the harms of nuclear weapons and therefore try to achieve nuclear disarmament and world peace. So thank you so much once again for your comments and for being with us today. And finally, we have Bishop Swing, who will give his comments. So Bishop Swing, you have the floor.
Good, thank you very much. I thought it was an honor to listen to you all today. I don't have opportunities to hear people your age talk about an issue like this. And obviously, you jumped into it with everything you have. And I was very impressed with both sides of the arguments. Where I'm coming from would be several things. When a lot of your arguments and a lot of thinking about nuclear arms has to do with a country. Pakistan and nuclear arms, India nuclear arms, but and I think that was the case for a while. It was Russia and America. It was Cuba. It was, you always think of nation and bomb, but we've gone beyond that. With all the nations and all the bombs, it's not a matter of nations, it's a matter of the total environment. I don't think it's a national issue. Ultimately, I think it's a environmental issue. What's going to happen to the planet Earth? It's not one nation, it's one world is the issue. Another thing that crosses my mind is that the world has been here for billions of years. The world has been free of nuclear weapons for billions of years, and the world as a whole has made it. We've only had nuclear weapons for 75 years, and we pat ourselves on the back to say we haven't destroyed the world. Well, that's a very short span. Playing with awfully big stakes here. I side with the billions of years without them, rather than the 75 years with them. People talk about safeguards, and I think that's a very important point. What goes into the safeguards? If you're on a submarine that has the nuclear weapons, the people who are in charge of the submarines are the top people in the Navy, for instance. They're the people who pass the tests, psychological, mental, emotional, and they have their hands on the nuclear weapons that could obliterate millions of people in minutes. And the safeguards of those people is really good and needs to be commended on the one hand. On the other hand, an awful lot of this nuclear thinking is based on perfection, that we will have perfect politicians with their fingers on the button, and we'll have perfect safeguards, and we'll have perfect everything. In my understanding of human nature, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And when you make a mistake in this field, it's not a little mistake, it's a gigantic mistake. And so it's checks and balances. And also, I worry about perpetuity. We have 2 countries with nuclear weapons. And then we have 9 countries with nuclear weapons. And then we have some more countries who want to get their hands on nuclear weapons. And then we have some rogue groups that would love to have their hands on nuclear weapons. Okay, for maybe 75 years, we don't blow the place up, but think about 200 years. If we modernize in 2020 our nuclear weapons, and we modernize it in 240, and they're not 9 countries, they're 15 countries, and the weapons are bigger, and how long out into history can you imagine us going before the whole thing comes crashing down? It might be okay for a couple of years, and we might be doing a pretty good job. We are doing a good job. But I cannot imagine 300 years from now, the planet Earth having the proliferation of weapons in the stronger weapons and the more nations and the more hands on it, I can't imagine there being a planet Earth with human life on it. I think it's a, it's a scientific, it's a issue, it's a political issue, but ultimately it's a spiritual, moral issue. Who created this beautiful planet? What are we responsible for, for this, everything that we've inherited? I think there's nothing more important to talk about in the world than the subject that you all debated today. You can talk about climate change, and we should be talking about that, and it's crucial. But nuclear weapons are the ultimate climate change, and it only takes a few minutes to alter the entire climate forever. We have to be answerable to God for what we did with this earth, and I don't think we can offer on the altar of life nuclear weapons and say these are our great gifts to you. I think it's shameful. It's the ultimate blasphemy to take everything good that we've been given in creation and say, we're going to threaten to destroy it all. Well, there's no greater blasphemy than that. Or when a president of the United States puts his or her hand on the Bible and says, I'm going to defend this country, that's one thing. But then we make the president of the United States put his finger on the bomb. And he's not a politician then, or she's not a politician, then you're God. You're playing God with all of life on this planet. And we shouldn't do that. That's immoral. I mean, when you take the president of the United States last year said, when there's a hurricane coming to America, why don't we just drop a nuclear bomb on the hurricane? I mean, of all the comic, silly, that's the guy whose finger's on the bomb. We've got to do better than this. I'm not talking about him as a politician. I just mean human beings will ultimately trivialize nuclear weapons. Even Eisenhower thought about dropping atomic bombs on three different occasions, and he was the most moral of the bunch. So that's I'm terrible at computers, but I'm glad to be on with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Singh, and we're so glad that you were with us today and we're able to share your perspectives on this very important issue. And a very important point that you made is that we are all human beings who make mistakes, and in the case of nuclear weapons, one mistake could be catastrophic for humanity and the planet, which is just one of the reasons why it's so important that we abolish nuclear weapons. So thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you so much to all of our judges for sharing your insights on this extremely important topic. So the Green Hope team has tabulated the final scores. Before I announce the scores, I would like to congratulate each and every one of you young debaters for being so amazing. And in a debate, there are no winners or losers, and you should all be justifiably proud of yourselves for the spectrum of arguments and diversity of thought that you brought to the table. So thank you so much once again, and congratulations to all of you. I would now like to give the floor to Erin, our outreach officer, Green Hope Foundation, to announce the individual speaker awards for the debate. So Erin, you have the floor.
Hey everyone, congratulations again. So we shall start with the award for the best speaker of the debate. This goes to Nuha Patani of Team GAF. The best speaker from Team Acacia is Evangeline. From Team Banyan, we have Ananya. From Team Mangrove, we have Maisha, and again, the best speaker of Team Goth, Nuha.
Great, thank you so much, and congratulations to our best speakers. Okay, so now I am going to announce the team winners, the moment we've all been waiting for. So in third place, we have Team Banyan from India. Congratulations, guys. In second place, we have Team Mangrove from Bangladesh. Congratulations. And the winner of this debate is Team Kaf from the United Arab Emirates. So congratulations to all of you. We will email you your certificates, and your medals will be couriered to you. So great, great job, guys. And a huge congratulations to Team Kaf for winning this debate. A huge shout out to the entire Green Hope team who worked behind the scenes to make this event possible. So thank you so much, Tanya, Aaron, Joshua, Christoph, and Hitasha. Without the Green Hope team support, this would not have been possible. And
who was the winner, Kekishan? What's
Team
the winning?
Team Kaf is the winner.
Who are the people on that team?
So the people on the team are Mahir, Nuha, Ashley, and Veer. So congratulations, guys. Very, very congratulations, and excellent points made. And as all our judges stated, as an opposition, you were at a slight disadvantage, but you made it through, and congratulations once again. And yeah, thank you once again to our judges for being so amazing and for all the comments and suggestions that you gave to our young debaters. And just what an amazingly passionate debate this has been. Our objective today was to shine a light on this critical issue of nuclear disarmament and its linkages with peace as seen through the youth lens. And I think all of us agree that the four teams have done fabulously. A debate is a simulation of the intellect, and I'm sure that there were learnings in it for all of us. Let's get more young people involved on this issue of nuclear disarmament. I know a lot of our judges mentioned that this is a topic that young people a new novel idea for young people to be involved in, but I think it's so important that we need a deluge of opinions, we need a surge of suggestions from all young people, for this is one topic that is unfortunately not yet in the mainstream of discussions for young people, which is probably why 75 years since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the threat of nuclear war still remains as the greatest threat to our existence. So our heartfelt thank you and acknowledgement to our esteemed judges. Thank you for being with us today. And of course, thank you and congratulations to all of our young debaters. You did amazing. And I'm sure you've learned a lot from this, and you'll be able to take forward the suggestions and comments given to you and make so much a positive change in this world. Please stay safe and let us continue to work together to realize our common dream of a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone. And happy National Youth Day to everyone.
Happy Youth Day.
Thank
you so much.
Youth Day. Thank you, guys.